Picture this, a massive Gothic structure located at 1241 Elm Street and built on top of an ancient burial ground. It sounds like the perfect horror movie setup, except this nightmare on Elm Street is real. Beneath the ornate Gothic spires of Cincinnati's Music Hall lies one of America's most haunted foundations, a cemetery of the forgotten dead where countless souls were buried in mass graves during the city's darkest chapters. Built directly atop a potter's field where cholera victims, steamboat disaster casualties, and the city's unknown were bundled and dropped into the ground without coffins. Music Hall and neighboring Washington Park represent the haunting intersection of cultural grandeur and unspeakable tragedy. The supernatural activity documented here spans over 140 years, with numerous witnesses, encounters, and investigations confirming what local lore has whispered for generations. The dead beneath these hallowed halls have never truly found rest. Cincinnati's Music Hall stands as a monument to both artistic achievement and historical horror. Constructed between 1876 and 1879 by architect Samuel Hannaford in high Victorian Gothic style, this 372-foot masterpiece conceals a foundation of tragedy that explains its supernatural reputation. The site's dark history began in 1818 when it was designated as a potter's field, Cincinnati's burial ground for the poor, unknown, and unwanted. The 1832 cholera outbreak claimed 832 lives in a city of just 30,000 residents. Victims perished in agony from dehydration and organ failure. The speed of death overwhelmed normal burial practices, leading to mass graves and hasty interments. The devastating 1838 Moselle steamboat disaster added another layer of tragedy. On April 25th, 1838, all 4 boilers exploded simultaneously on the Ohio River, killing over 150 people. Bodies and debris literally rained down on Cincinnati, with unidentified victims buried in the potter's field. But it was the 1849 cholera epidemic that truly filled these grounds with the dead. This outbreak claimed approximately 6,000 lives, 5% of Cincinnati's entire population. With German and Irish immigrants dying in such numbers, they were buried without names or markers. The sheer volume of death overwhelmed Cincinnati's burial capacity, leading to the bundling and dropping method that showed little respect for human dignity. The site also housed the Cincinnati Orphan Asylum starting in the 1830s, adding countless children's remains to the already crowded burial ground. Directly across from Music Hall, Washington Park shares the same haunted foundation. This seemingly peaceful green space was built over 2 historic cemeteries, the Presbyterian Burying Ground and Christ Episcopal Churchyard. While most burials were supposedly relocated to Spring Grove Cemetery in the 1850s, archaeological evidence suggests incomplete removal. This historical trauma created a perfect storm for paranormal activity. Massive numbers of tragic deaths, improper burial practices, unmarked graves, and ongoing disturbance of remains through construction projects. These 2 locations, overlapping with traumatic history, seem to fuel continuous supernatural activity. When construction of Music Hall began in 1876, human remains were immediately unearthed. On October the 22nd, 1876, the Cincinnati commercial newspaper reported, This rich yellow soil, fat with the human flesh and bone and brain it has devoured, is being disemboweled by 100 spades and forced to exhibit its ghastly secrets to the sun. But rather than properly relocating all bodies, many were simply moved to a different section under the building. Other remnants were stolen at night by medical students. During a 1927 renovation, 65 graves were discovered in the south wing alone, earning the area the macabre nickname Valley of Death. Renovations in 1988 led to the discovery of over 200 pounds of bones near the elevator shaft. When excavation work for the redevelopment of Washington Park began in 2010, 23 grave shafts were uncovered. Some of those grave markers are now displayed as historical artifacts. Most recently, in 2016, more skeletons were found beneath the orchestra pit. Every major renovation uncovers more human remains. Music Hall's paranormal encounters span over a century, with numerous witnesses and documented incidents that defy explanation. The earliest reported encounters come shortly before Music Hall was built. The exposition building was the predecessor of Music Hall and stood in the same lot that Music Hall now resides. In an 1875 newspaper article, a night watchman of the exposition building recounts his paranormal experiences. The weirdest and strangest noises would occur at intervals all night. Rappings on the ceiling, under the floor, on the doors and windows, the sound of stealthy footfalls behind me, or of loud tramping before me, the crash of heavy timbers thrown from the ceiling, of glass dashed upon the floor, of heavy bodies being dragged over the planking. These never ceased except during exposition time. Roughly 100 years later, on February 22nd, 1987, Music Hall security guard John Engst had his own encounter. Around 12:30 a.m., while escorting 3 caterers from a party to the first floor, the women asked if he heard music in the elevator. Initially, he said no, but by the time they reached the first floor, he could hear it too. After the caterers left, Engst investigated alone. The music, sounding like a music box, continued emanating from the elevator shaft. He tested it systematically, stopping at each floor to check if the sound persisted and searching all areas around the elevator for a source. The experience so affected him that for 2 weeks afterward, his whole body would tingle whenever he approached the elevator. However, elevator encounters don't end there. Scott Santangelo, Music Hall's operations director for 13 years, personally witnessed elevator buttons lighting up when the building was empty.
No, other than the odd operation of the freight elevator. When you are doing a lockup at 2 a.m. and you're approaching the elevator and the light that calls it to a floor clicks on when you're 50 feet away from it, and it makes a little movement, you know, you need a key to do that. Right, so perhaps it's purely mechanical, but it's certainly a little unsettling when you're the only one in the building.
Right. Security guard Kitty Love, who worked at Music Hall for over 20 years, reported consistent supernatural encounters during her night shifts. "I hear them when I'm on duty alone at night," she explained. "Footsteps, doors slamming and music playing, and I know I was the only one in the building. You hear music playing somewhere late at night when you know no one is there. But when you get there, you find it coming from some other place. You go to that place, and then you hear it coming from yet another place. Box 9 in the auditorium harbors its own resident spirit."
There are stories that involve Box 9. A gentleman who worked for the Cincinnati Opera brought his son onto the stage, and the little boy pointed out to the box and said, "Daddy, who's that man in the box?" And his father looked and said, "There's no one in that box." And the little boy said, "Yes, there is, and he's waving at me."
The North Exhibition Hall, now used as a backstage workshop, sits directly over the former Cincinnati Orphan Asylum. Here, Multiple witnesses report child apparitions in period dress.
Friends of one of our staff's family were in the backstage area, and they reported that a little girl told them not to go into the basement areas, saying that bad things had happened there. They turned and there was no little girl there.
The Music Hall Ballroom hosts what may be the building's most elegant apparition, the Lady in White.
The most famous claim at Cincinnati Music Hall is that of a lady in white. She's been seen both inside and outside the building.
I caught some movement and just turned my head in time to see the back of a light-colored gown. And I thought to myself, this isn't crazy, this is real.
Turned just in time to see what appeared to be the back of a lady in a white gown with a bustle on the back. I immediately moved to the parking lot. Nothing there.
Numerous other staff members and patrons have also had ghostly encounters.
We've had situations with the staff that they've heard whispering at the back of the auditorium. They've heard seats pop up.
We make it a point to flip the chairs up. We always go back and check them, and these seats are spring-loaded. They do not go down easily. They don't stay down easily, and you'll see them down in really weird places, not at ends of rows, but in the middles of rows, and it happens fairly often.
Some of the patrons that'll be here for a symphony will come out during intermission and tell one of the ushers how nice they thought it was to see people in the seating area dressed in turn-of-the-century clothing, and the usher will stand back and say, "What are you talking about?"
It was myself and another team member were actually sitting on the stage one night, and we saw someone, a shadow figure, walk in this door, walk down this back aisle, and disappear.
Music Hall attracted national attention when Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters investigated the location for their Halloween 2014 special episode, Phantoms of the Opera. The Ghost Hunters team captured several pieces of evidence during their investigation, including multiple voice recordings. The investigation helped validate decades of staff reports.
Of them.
Yeah, there's no doubt I certainly heard it.
Male voice.
Yeah.
As the lights dim in Cincinnati's Music Hall each night and the last patron exits through those heavy doors onto Elm Street, something awakens. The building doesn't sleep. It remembers. It remembers the 10,000 souls buried beneath its foundation, the cholera victims who died gasping for air, the orphans who never found families, the nameless bodies from the Moselle explosion scattered like broken dolls across the riverfront. Every renovation unearths more bones. Every dig reveals another forgotten grave. And with each disturbance, the voices grow louder.